how to write a poem. I get approached all the time by people who are fans of my poetry and tell me that they just can't write poetry. The process I'm going to take you through in this video is something that I have done countless times when it comes to writing a poem. It is about removing the rules and then having the intention for what you write to be a poem. And that will activate this process. So what is the actual process? What is up, family? Welcome to another episode of the Creative Path Podcast. My name is Adam Roa, and today I am going to take you through a step-by-step process for how to write a poem. This is really important to me because I get approached all the time by people who are fans of my poetry and tell me that they just can't write poetry. Their brains don't work that way. And the process I'm going to take you through in this video is something that I have done countless times with clients and with people who attend my live events like Poetry and Possibility. And I've had, at this point, it must be at least 20, 30, 40 people that come up to me afterwards, having written a poem that's great, and say to me, that's the first poem I've ever written. I didn't know I could write poetry. I've always thought that I just didn't have it in me. And many of them go on to start writing poetry more regularly. And so I know that this process works, so we will get into that. But the starting place before doing that is asking you the question, what is poetry? When a lot of people say, I don't write poetry, I can't write poetry, well, what is poetry? You see, for me, poetry is writing without rules, first and foremost. You're removing the rules of grammar and punctuation and needing to make sense. You're just removing all of that and allowing yourself to express with the intention of it being a poem. That's it. It's literally that simple. Remove the rules and set the intention of it being a poem. And we're going to go into why that's important, to have the intention for it to be a poem. Because normally when you are writing, you're going to be writing from a very cerebral space. Most of the thoughts that we have on any given day, 95% of them we've actually had before. Every single day you are having the vast majority of your thoughts are thoughts you've had before. And that also means that when you're thinking about situations, they're the same patterns of thinking that you've thought before. When you're thinking about that breakup, when you're thinking about what to do about your job, when you're thinking about your family or your romantic partner, your thought patterns are very much the same. But the moment that you say, I am going to write a poem about it, what you're doing is you're activating a different part of your brain that was not active when you were thinking about it before. And that is actually the point. The process is the point. So many people in modern society get hung up on what is the result, what is the poem at the end. But that to me is a major disservice to the power of what's possible through the creative process. That's why this podcast is called the Creative Path Podcast, because underneath the results, underneath, behind the finished poem, is actually a process that you went through to put together new patterns that you've never put together before while looking at a situation that you previously were seeing through a repetitive series of thoughts. And now imagine what happens when you look at your breakup through an entirely new lens. Imagine what's possible when you look at your future through an entirely new lens. When that happens, you open up new possibilities. You also loosen the hold of the old ones. And so if I'm going to use say you're in a fight with your spouse and it's a bad one. You've been fighting for several days and you are just by human nature repeating the same thought patterns over and over, both of you. That's just kind of what we do as human beings. Now you say, I'm gonna turn this into a poem. I'm going to write a poem about this fight, this conflict, what I'm feeling right now. This will activate your brain in an entirely different way. By activating your brain in an entirely different way, you will loosen the hold of the old way that you previously viewed it through, and you will open up new possibilities for how you view the fight, how you view your spouse, and how you view how you're moving forward. That's huge. And you can apply this to every area of your life, and you can do this through any means of creativity as long as the intention to express it creatively is there. And that is why when it comes to writing a poem, it is about removing the rules and then having the intention for what you write to be a poem. And that will activate this process that we're about to go through. All right, so what is the actual process? Step 1, journal a brain dump. Dump everything that's going on in your mind about a subject onto paper. So we've been talking about a fight, right? Let's just stay on that. You're in a fight with your spouse, journal about it. Really allow yourself permission to just free write. You're not trying to solve it. You're not trying to get anywhere with it. You are actually just trying to express what is going on inside yourself out on paper. Write about it. Let it out. That's step 1. Easy. Everyone can do that. Again, most of what you're writing is going to be stuff you've been thinking about before. Now, step 2. Go through what you've written, reread it, and I want you to highlight, circle, put a star next to, underline any lines that bring up an emotional charge of some kind. So as you're reading it, if there's this single line that stands out, circle it. As you're reading it, if there's a moment where it brings up tears to your eyes as you read it back, circle it, underline it, highlight it. As you're going through it, if you read something, you go, whoa, that was really deep, circle it. If you just like the way something was worded and it brings that element of, that's pretty cool how I said that, circle it. And what you've now done is you have primed yourself with the subject matter and what your mind already knows and has expressed onto paper. You've also primed it with the pieces of that hold the emotion, positive, negative, whatever you have inside of that, the emotion, which is energy in motion. And really writing a poem or creating great art is about riding the emotion. Like a wave, we find that emotion and we figure out how to ride it into an expression of some kind. And so now you are going to go into the actual poetry writing process. The poetry writing will be, take a line, make it the first line. Take one of those lines that you circled, make it the very first line. Many of you have heard my poem, You Are Who You've Been Looking For, the one that went viral, 250 million views and counting. How did that poem come to be? Because a friend of mine said to me, hey, your next poem should be called You Are Who You've Been Looking For. And I thought, sure, why not? And I went home and I wrote the first line, You Are Who You've Been Looking For. And I started from there. It's gone on to completely change my life. You have no idea what's possible when you just allow a prompt to send you on a journey. And you have prompted yourself. You have prompted yourself with something that is emotionally charged for you, and then you've synthesized and picked out some of the biggest points, lines, sentences, themes that have that charge, and now that becomes a prompt. So write the line, then write the next one, and then write the next one and see what happens. And if you get stuck, go back to your writing, reread it. At the very least, go back and see the lines that you've circled or highlighted and take them and say, okay, I really like this one. Can I transition from where I am being stuck into one of these next lines? Because I know there's emotion in it. So if I can get there, it will be another round of emotion that I can tap into. And so there we go, building and building. And when you remove the rules, meaning it doesn't need to rhyme. That's a big one. It does not need to rhyme. It does not need, you don't need to worry about the metaphors or the similes or the alliteration or the onomatopoeia. You don't have to worry about any of that. All you need to do is set the intention that what you are writing is a poem. It will activate your brain in an entirely different way. You will access what you have done in steps 1 and 2 as you write. And when you feel its completion, share it. The final step, share it. To me, there's something very special in sharing art. When you do that, you are allowing part of your soul to be seen. It's an incredibly vulnerable act. And because of how vulnerable it is, and because it is you expressing your soul, it is also one of the most powerful acts of self-love that you can do. To say, the soul in my body is worthy of being seen and expressed. I am willing to risk rejection or ridicule in order to honor that part of me, is a massive act of self-love. And it will be healing for you, and ultimately it'll be healing for the people who hear it. It'll be healing for the people who haven't yet given themselves permission to express in the way that you just did. At some point in time, I had to overcome my fears to share my poetry. And now here we are. Many of you are here right now getting this download because of my poetry. And my poetry was only shared because I was willing to face that fear of rejection and learn through the sharing. And so that's the final piece. It's optional, I get that. Even if you only write for yourself and you never share it with anyone else, it will still have value. It will still open up new possibilities in your mind. It will still allow you a safe space to express. But I do encourage you to open up the other side of that coin and share it. If this has been valuable for you, please share it out with someone else and then exchange poems. That's one of the easiest ways to create a safe space, is to create relationships with people where you can share your art with each other. And post it in the comments of this video if you're willing to do that. I would love to see the different poems that are actually created as a result of this process. Thank you for being a part of this journey and for walking your creative path alongside me on my creative path. Thank you, thank you, thank you for doing this work. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you are interested in building a life that you love through the 3 pillars of relationship, business, and creativity, then I encourage you to continue checking out more of my content, including this video, which I really think that you will like.